of prevention on violence against women. We're going to give it to you in 4 doses. We have 4 presenters. So your arms are not going to hurt at all. We hopefully stifle your brain just a little bit, but we're grateful for our presenters, and I will introduce them as we go. Just so you know, also the restrooms, should anybody need, right by the doors, you walk in. Exits, we're not going to have an issue. I think if we need to vacate the building, it's very obvious where they are, and they're right behind us back that way also. Cell phones, if you would, please silence your cell phone or put it on mute, turn it off. But if your cell phone does ring during any of the presentations, I'm going to suggest that perhaps you make a financial donation of $5, okay? And I think that donation should go to the shelter house in Muscatine. So Judy Yates, raise your hand. Judy is the manager of the shelter house in Muscatine. So if anybody's phone rings, I know Judy would not be reluctant. She'd be gratefully accepting any financial donation. Good man, good man. I hope you hear a lot more ringing before the night's over. Tom, can you start dialing numbers? Terrific, terrific. Okay. This is what I hope will be our first annual forum on violence against women. And I hope we can continue and build on this every year going forward from now. But did you know that almost 1 in 3 women have been subjected to physical and/or sexual intimate partner violence, non-partner sexual violence, or both at least once in their life? And that's 30% of women 15 years or older. Did you know that most violence against women is perpetrated by current or former husbands or intimate partners? Did you know that of those in a relationship, almost 1 in 4 adolescent girls aged 15 to 19 have already experienced physical and/or sexual violence from an intimate partner or a husband? And did you know that globally, 18,000 women and girls were killed in 2020? 58% of those died at the hands of an intimate partner or a family member. Those numbers are just shocking to me. So let's get to our first dose of education medicine to help educate and prevent the violence against women. Our first presenter is Deacon Chris Cabot. Deacon Chris was ordained in the Sacred Order of Deacon in July 8th of 2017. He serves the parish of St. Wenceslaus of Iowa City. In addition to his other deacon duties, he serves the Diocese of Davenport when Marriage and Family Life Committee focuses on strengthening family and the sacrament of marriage and providing education and resources on the harmful effects of pornography. Deacon Cabot has been a member of St. Wenceslaus since 2008. He's married to his wife, Julie, and they have 3 boys, Nathan, Noah, and John. So if you would, please give a nice warm welcome to Deacon Cabot.
Thank you, Tom, and really glad to be here to give you some perspective on pornography, which if somebody would have asked me 10 years ago, you're going to get up in front of people and talk about pornography, I thought you're crazy, because this is just a word that I've had to grow accustomed to start saying. It's not necessarily an easy word that we all want to say, but let's admit the fact, pornography is out there and we have to do something about it. So to kind of give you some perspective, as Tom said, I was ordained 5 years ago, and one of the projects that we had to do before our ordination was put together what they called a I forget now the term, the research paper, the ultimate plan of study after our 5 years of study. And so it was a natural for me to put marriage and pornography together, as I had had a family issue with pornography. I'd had a personal issue with pornography. And now I had to live it out profoundly on a very intimate level. And now I had the blessing of formation to understand what that is and what it does to people. And so I was able to synthesize my experiences, the church's teaching, and how all this fits together. And so now I meet people like Tom and find out, they find out what I do, and I get to come and talk about pornography now. So it's an interesting place to be as part of church, as part of my family, because I do now have history with it. But it's real, and it affects people. And I've seen people in very, very dark places because of pornography. So my hope for you today is just to kind of give you a snippet of what's out there and to help give you some tools to help build against that tsunami that's coming at us. So to give you some perspective, can anybody tell me when the first Playboy was published? 1953. December 1st, 1953 was the first issue. Does anybody know when the first iPhone came onto the market?
91.
2007.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Bill Gates actually announced it at the big Mac convention on January 1st, 3rd, whenever that convention was, early January 2007. It went on sale June 29th, 2007. And I think what's interesting is when we start to think about the influence of pornography. Certainly it started in 1953, but it went to a whole new level starting in 2007. If I were to say, how do you define pornography today? And I'm not going to ask you. A lot of you may still say, well, pornography is just that in the Playboy or the Penthouse. But I will argue and tell you that those are the least visited places now of where pornography is found. It's all over the internet, and it's not just a picture of a naked woman or a naked man doing weird things. It's very much graphic and hardcore and sick. So it's really gone to this whole new level, especially since the advent of the iPhone. There was a study, and this unfortunately goes back to only 2015, talking about hanging out with friends. Throughout the 70s and 80s and 2000s, kids in high school hung out with their friends. 2 to 3 friends in their friend group. When the iPhone is released, I don't know if you can see this or not, but it falls off a cliff. Kids stopped hanging out with each other. And likewise, they asked him, do you feel lonely? As soon as the iPhone came out, more kids started feeling lonely or feeling left out. And what was there to fill the void but pornography? So, as a definition, Webster gives the definition of pornography as the depiction of erotic behavior, as in pictures or writing, intended to cause sexual excitement, or its material, books, photographs that depict erotic behavior. So that's the dictionary version. The 1986 Attorney General's Commission on Pornography defined it as material that is predominantly sexually explicit and intended primarily for the use of sexual arousal. 1986, we already had a commission on pornography. Our Catholic Church defines pornography. Consists in removing real or simulated sexual acts from the intimacy of the partners in order to display them deliberately to third parties. It offends against chastity because it perverts the conjugal act, the intimate giving of spouses to each other. It does grave injury to the dignity of its participants, the actors, the vendors, and the public, since each one becomes an object of base pleasure and illicit profit for others. It immerses all who are involved in the illusion of a fantasy world. It is a grave offense. Civil authorities should prevent the production and distribution of pornographic materials. I think it's very interesting that the church even went that far to say civil authorities need to stop this because it's so harmful. To give you an idea of how prevalent it is, this is an article that was published in Forbes, January 2018. They did a year in review of one specific pornographic website, Pornhub, which I am happy to say has begun the process of being dismantled, thanks in much part to the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. If you haven't searched out their website, I would encourage you to go to their website. They've got a ton of resources, a ton of research. They're fighting this from a legislative perspective. But Pornhub is off of Instagram. They are going after how they get funded. So Visa and MasterCard are being cut off. So they're losing their revenue stream. So hopefully Pornhub will be completely dismantled soon. But to give you an idea of what happens on a website like this. So this was 2017. So this is already 5-year-old data. There were 28.5 billion visits, in the year 2017. That's 81 million daily visits to Pornhub. There was over 4 million videos uploaded in 2017. If you were to sit and watch all those videos that were uploaded, it would take you 68 years. That's just a little bit of content. And it's 10 million gigabytes a day that is being uploaded. The top search in 2017 was lesbian. The only competitor, it seems, to pornography was the Super Bowl. There was a 24% decrease in web traffic during the Super Bowl that year. But Sunday is still the busiest day on Pornhub. We should be at church. What are we doing on the internet? Searching porn. 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. are the busiest times. And mobile traffic. Again, going back to the iPhone. Mobile traffic accounted for 67% of the traffic share in 2017. I can tell you right now, these are the most dangerous things to have in your pocket, especially for a child. The average age that a child is exposed to pornography, whether they like it or not, is usually by age 9 and getting younger. And it's mainly because of the phones. So suffice it to say that there's a lot of nastiness out there. And that's just one pornography website. On average, there's 28,000 users watching porn every second. $3,075 is spent on porn every second of every day. It is big, big business, which is why this topic is such a timely one. Because pornography feeds human trafficking, feeds sex trafficking, feeds prostitution, feeds violence. They all go together. And so if we can't stop one, how do we stop another? And so if you ever go out and visit the National Center on Sexual Exploitation website, you'll see their big push is to cut supply off. How do you cut supply? You cut pornography. And if you cut pornography, sex trafficking goes down, human trafficking goes down, violence will go down. Because it's shown that the more you watch pornography, the more it leads to violence. There was a study I don't have it quoted here. But essentially, it's not a warm, fuzzy sexual embrace. It's violent. Typically more than one person involved, meaning even more than two people involved. If there is violence involved, the female is depicted as enjoying it. So it breaks down all those barriers of what we think a sexual relationship should be. If we're not, as parents and teachers and pastors and deacons, what a true sexual relationship looks like, and they learn it out here on the internet, this is what they're learning a sexual relationship looks like. And because they're learning it out here is why you're seeing things like rape continue to happen. Rape is increasing on college campuses. The majority of users of pornography are college-age men, but the fastest growing segment of pornography users is women. So it's not just a male issue anymore, unfortunately. But there are things we can do to hopefully curb some of these things. So I went through the Pornhub stats. Some of the challenges that we have to overcome. Just 55% of adults, 25% or older, think pornography is wrong. So we're fighting the tide of this apathy. A lot of people are saying it's healthy. Well, that's just a healthy thing. It's free speech. Actually not. There's 40 studies that show the addictive nature to pornography and the way its users can escalate from comparatively mild to more extreme. I had this happen. A gentleman came to me, gosh, I think it was 2018. He approached me in a very dark place. Could not stop the addiction. Watching porn multiple times a day. Marriage was shaky at best. And he had escalated from just watching it on his phone, searching it on Pornhub or wherever website he was using, to chat rooms, which then escalated to, well, maybe I'll drive Uber, and I'll drive Uber at bar close time. And there were multiple times that he was in situations where he could have gotten himself in very serious trouble. But by the grace of God, he didn't. But that was that escalation factor, and went from a simple image on his phone to putting himself in grave danger of cheating on his wife and who knows what else because of that escalation. Pornography changes your brain. It's just like a hit of heroin. When that image flashes on the screen, it's blazoned into your brain and you can't get it out. If anybody's ever experienced it, I bet you can go back to that picture you first saw. It's still in there. It's still in there for me. It's a demon I can't get rid of. But by God's grace, we continue to fight, and we know the truth, and we let the truth continue to lead us on. But that brain shrinkage, it shrinks the frontal lobe of your brain. The frontal lobe of your brain is where you make decisions. So as that frontal lobe loses its matter, you become less and less able to make decisions properly, which is why that escalation. Like the drug user who had that first hit of heroin that was the best high they ever had, continued to chase that dragon. It's the same with pornography. They can't ever get that same high from the first time. And what they're finding is the more and the longer you're addicted to it, it actually is making men impotent. There's erectile dysfunction, pornography-induced erectile dysfunction. Some men never get it back. It's very sad. And they didn't do it necessarily searching this out, saying, I'm going to become a porn addict. Many times it was a pop-up on the screen. There was a traumatic event in their youth. Like you say, 1 in 3 women. There's usually a man involved. There's usually a trauma involved, which kind of drives that desire. But with healing, they can overcome. Yeah, here's the stat. The analysis of the 50 most popular pornographic videos found that 88% of scenes contained physical violence, 49% contained verbal aggression, 87% of the aggressive acts were perpetrated against women, and 95% of their responses were either neutral or expressions of pleasure. So pornography definitely is violent against women. It's violent against men. It harms relationships. It increases your tendency towards violence. And it's just a nasty circle because it leads to then to the sex trafficking. It leads to domestic violence, which is why these women are here doing their jobs, heroic efforts to protect our women. I'll leave you with this quote from somebody who had a problem. I don't feel like I ever learned to be a sexual person until I was a teenager. I never saw my parents showing one another affection. They never sat on the couch together, never hugged, never held hands, never kissed in front of us kids. I learned about sex from other places, like my friends and pornography. Whatever I was curious about, there was an answer just a click away. When I got married, my expectations were based on the videos I had seen and stories I had heard, not the reality of the woman in front of me and her emotional and spiritual needs. I really hurt her with the things I introduced into our sexual relationship. I wish I could take them back. So that's pornography in a nutshell. I'm happy to answer any questions. I would say, like I did mention, the National Center on Sexual Exploitation, please go to that website. There's a lot of resources. They usually do what's called a white ribbon against pornography push at the end of the month of October. So watch for that. And then Covenant Eyes is another one. This document here is a compilation of about 250 different studies on pornography. It's available on their website. It's free. If you want even more in-depth information on pornography, go to covenanteyes.com. It's a free download and you can have it on your fingertips and you can be armed to help people ward it off. So with that, I'll take any questions.
What was that site?
It's covenanteyes.com.
Eyes.com.
And it's actually a great spot for parents or other people to go as well, because there's some accountability software you can put on your phones and computers. So, yeah.
Okay. We're fighting in our schools, and I think this is nationwide, that there are books with pornographic porn in them. And they could be from great authors, but they are from our ELC all the way up to our high school. And there has been a lot of conversation with our educators as far as, can we please remove them, because what we're doing is we're sexualizing our children, which is leading into a lot of the things that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And not that there is any desire to ban books, although that's exactly what it sounds like. The whole purpose is to remove the porn. We've got to set a standard. We've got to educate our kids, not sexualize our children. And we have come up against a roadblock, and the school has, due diligence. They've hired a consultant. They went to AEA and they said, well, we got a great diverse group of books there. even our own educators are not recognizing what porn can do to the mentality of a young brain. You know, how do we handle that? How can we get them to understand that they are damaging our children?
Well, I think you can arm them. It's a great question, because it's happening in communities all across the nation. And you are seeing some victories happen, where there are titles being removed from libraries. So the fight is not impossible. Seemingly insurmountable, yes. But I think the more you can arm them with data of how many people are exposed, the incidence of increased violence, the incidence of increased rape, the incidence of lack of friendships. I mean, the way to date a girl anymore is to send them a nude. Right? I mean, that's what's happening. That's the reality. Send me a picture and I'll see if I want to go out with you. It's craziness.
Wow.
You know, so until we can break through that, because part of it is apathy on the public side. They don't know the dangers of it. You know, when 45% say, well, yeah, no big deal. Only 55% say there's something wrong. We're already fighting a very slim majority that believe what we believe, that this is wrong. So we have to somehow build that knowledge base that this is wrong and it's doing harm to our kids. And we can go in armed with studies like this that show the harms, that show the addiction cycle, how hard it is to break. I mean, it's a 3 to 5 year process to break a pornography addiction, just like alcoholism. There's a 12-step program for porn addicts. It's the only way they can do it, through support, through love, through constant vigilance, accountability, because it's there and anything can trigger it. So the more we can get that information out there, I think the better we can stop the wave of sexualizing our children. But it's a tough battle. And we know when we enter in, we know it's going to be, we're in it for the long term. There's not going to be an easy victory.
You said the initial introduction was at age 8, did I hear approximately?
Yeah.
Are there any statistics on, I guess I'm trying to go towards what the question was, school age children and the exposure, any statistics on how pornography is growing in that age group?
That I'm not as familiar with as to how it's growing. Where we're seeing a lot of the exposures are incidental contacts. They'll put in a very simple search into a Google search. They'll type in breast, or they'll type in pregnancy, or they'll type in sex. Then you've just opened a huge portal. And of course, Google Images fills in images for you. So if any of those things are happening, you're automatically exposed. So if your kids are using computers, grandkids, whatever, are using computers and you're not watching them, I'd encourage you to kind of be there. Check the search history, have conversations with them. The best teacher is when it happens, you don't explode, you embrace. So what happened? What did you just see? Let's talk about it. You can bring that traumatic exposure down to a much more manageable level, to where it's a non-issue. It doesn't affect their brain the way a hardcore pornographic hit might, if there's somebody there to intervene right away. So, and then the other thing that I'm hearing a lot of is there's always that one kid who has it and it's on his phone, and mom and dad might be all over this, but they go to a friend's house and now there's not that supervision, and the friend is, hey, check this out. And now they're exposed. And now there's nobody there to intervene either. So it just kind of sits and percolates. Very innocent and very hard to prevent. But, you know, if we know what the enemy's doing, we can then counterattack. So those are the two ways.
We're very thankful you are here tonight, and telling us all this information, and equally impressed and thankful that you are working within your church, within your community of faith, to help people with this very deep problem. In essence, is mainly a spiritual problem, basically. And how would you say that churches in our area or any area could begin to confront this? Would it be through the pastor or through the elders, the deacons? How would a church begin to set up defense for its members?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways. One is you can't be afraid to say the word pornography. And so that was a real lesson for me 5 years ago when I got ordained. It's like, okay, I got to say this now. And saying it from a pulpit in the setting of a sacred space, you would think is completely wrong, but it's not. It's okay for a pastor, a deacon, somebody to say the word from the pulpit and educate. Just make aware and make it part of the gospel. This is the good news. Unfortunately, pornography is the bad news. But how do we fit the good news into it? So that's part of it. And then you empower parents to, through youth groups and other faith formation type things that are happening organically already anyway. How can we feed these conversations in? Because I know in talking with parents, they're scared to death. They don't know what to do. And a lot of them are frozen because they're scared to death. And so I send them the covenant eyes and say, at least look at some of the resources, look at the accountability software, look at some of the things that are there built in to protect you. And then let's have a listening session. We've done that a few times. To just continue to help awareness and arm parents and know that they're not in this alone. They're not on an island. We're all in here to help them together. So, yeah.
My understanding is a lot of the ministry has been approached. And you know what the favorite answer is? I don't want to get involved. Too toxic. What kind of answer is that?
I hate to say it, but it's a bit of a cop out.
And how do you fix that?
You can send them to somebody like me. Say, don't be scared of this topic. Or,
I mean, how can they say it's too toxic and they're afraid to?
well, the problem is that's the enemy at work.
Yeah.
The enemy knows, and its number one target is to destroy families. If the enemy can destroy families, he's got this one. But we know better.
Priests should know better,
Priests should know better.
or ministers.
Pastors, ministers, everybody should know better. The family is the root of society. If we can keep the family together, we're going to win. And God's grace is all around us. And when those things happen, it calls us to a deeper sense of prayer. What do we do? How do we act? For me, it's prayer. Where do I start? Lord, give me some guidance here. But we got to be brave enough to say, we got to speak up about these issues because they're very, very real. We don't see them like the domestic violence issue, the violence against women. We don't necessarily see it until it makes a headline. Molly Tibbetts, then it was front and center. And now it kind of fades away until we have an awareness month and we bring it back to light. But we got to do it all the time. And we can't be afraid of it. Yeah.
Pretty sad.
It is. It's a very challenging position to be. Yeah, I agree. I hear it from my brother deacons and brother priests and it's like, oh, come on, don't be scared. Yes, God loves us, but we got to speak the truth. Because he loves us. Yeah. Other questions? I don't want to take up the whole night for you. Thank you very much.
It's for parents, there are parental controls that we can only use. And that's for protecting our own children in our own home. And I just sent out an email to a couple of people, a list of minimum just 10 that I found of websites on the internet for parents to use and how to know how to set controls on the apps, on the computers, so they can protect and oversee their children. So I've got that list. I'll be glad to share that with anybody if anybody else would like that. And Deacon Chris, I very much appreciate your being here. I see how this impacts human trafficking, and I am dedicated to fighting human trafficking. And if anybody has any idea in what else I can do to help bring this about an end to pornography or violence, to help end violence and human trafficking, I'll do anything that I possibly can. So thank you so much for being here. Our second presenter, speaking of human trafficking, our second presenter is Sarah Kay. Sarah comes to us from Breaking Traffic, which is in fact the Division of Family Resources of Davenport. Breaking Traffic provides comprehensive services to victims of both labor and sex trafficking, covering the counties of Clinton, Jackson, Louisa, Muscatine, and Scott. But they will also consider referrals from anywhere else in eastern Iowa. Breaking Traffic provides trauma-informed services as needed, including housing, counseling, medical and court advocacy, while collaborating with law enforcement and other community agencies, training and public awareness around trafficking issues and safety and well-being of victims. And I apologize, I failed to share with you that our police chief, Chief Werling, is with us tonight. And speaking of law enforcement, he's here to help support in any way that he possibly can do. Now, I did mention Sarah Kay. Kay is not her last name. Kay is an initial. Because of the kind of work that she does for her safety and her protection, we can never use last names. You can imagine how a trafficker might feel if someone took an individual out of their stable. So please give a warm welcome to Sarah, and let's hear from her.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I am a survivor and an advocate for survivors. Today, we're going to talk about human trafficking and some of the risk factors and warning signs, and also how to identify a survivor and how to respond in a trauma-informed manner. Go ahead. Okay. Oh, you can go to the next slide.
Okay.
So Breaking Traffic and Survivor Services, we offer 24-hour crisis response team. We also have emergency shelter. We do rapid rehousing, and we also provide legal and medical advocacy, which looks like a lot of times we'll go on an out call to the hospital to be with a survivor and support them and explain the process. And then legal advocacy, we go to the courthouse sometimes and help fill out orders of protection. We also help with employment assistance and helping them get back on their feet. So what is your immediate image that you think of when you think of human trafficking? Can you go 2 slides?
Yeah.
So a lot of times you think of, we've heard because of social media, we've heard and just media in general, we've heard we've heard stranger danger, right? Or you think of male trafficking a female in a white van, but it's actually not the reality. A lot of times what we see is anybody can be trafficked. It can be a child, it could be a minor, a senior citizen, it could be a parent, trafficking another child. Traffickers can be anyone. They can be a peer at school. They could be a parent. They could be a grandparent. They could be a coach, a mentor. It can be anyone. Can you go back to the slide before that?
Mhm.
So human trafficking is the buying and selling of another human being through force, fraud, and coercion. Up here you see both sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Domestic servitude would be trafficking in the home, There's agriculture, factories, debt bondage, sales crews are like panhandling. You can also see with human trafficking is like trafficking in hotels or restaurants or nail salons. Next slide. So how does trafficking happen? There's the recruitment, trust, and exploitation. A lot of times it's not the kidnapping, though that does sometimes happen, but a lot of what we see is actually relationship building. So the trafficker will prey out the vulnerabilities and they'll seek out vulnerabilities and then get them to gain their trust. And that makes it easier to persuade and manipulate the survivor into doing what they want, and then they exploit them. Next slide. So coercion. A lot of times the survivor doesn't want to do, is being controlled. They don't want to do what they're doing, but they trust the trafficker. Also, there's a lot of fear tactics involved, and also coercion or control, and also I'm sorry. Can you go to the next slide?
Yeah.
And then also relationship building, so that trauma bond. This also looks kind of like the grooming process. So again, the trafficker is recruiting, they're seeking out vulnerabilities, and then they are filling a need, finding an area where they can come in. A lot of times we see this, I've seen it with social media, and there's a lot of, especially with younger teens, attention seeking, or they have problems at home. So the traffickers will be on the internet studying these things going on. They could be like magnifying the problem with what's going on at home so that the trafficker can come in and rescue and save the day, and try to isolate the survivor. So this is a heat map of the Polaris project in 2020. I think you have to click it one more time. Okay, so on the heat map right there is the Quad Cities, which is a hot spot, and there was the National Human Trafficking Hotline reported 10,583 cases, which actually is very underreported, and that's due to a lot of survivors don't know they're being trafficked. They're also afraid of some are afraid of law enforcement. Some are afraid that if they are to come forward, then where are they going to go? So forced fraud and coercion. So the difference between prostitution and human trafficking is that there has to be forced fraud or coercion involved. With trafficking, it has to be somebody that's managing another person for profit. Next slide. And then for the sake of time, I'm not going to show the video, but we're pushing on legislation to pass the Safe Harbor Act. Right now, I think there's like 34 states that do have this law in place, but for a minor not to be charged as prostitution. Right now, Iowa does not have that law. So if a minor were to be arrested, they could be charged with prostitution when in fact it could be trafficking. Next one. So here's some of the risk factors and vulnerabilities. We see this a lot of times. There's 76% of trafficking happens online. We also have foster group care, where I work with some of the foster group care, and they have been either court ordered to be there or they're sent because of bad situations in the home. Sometimes they want to run away, and so we have to have these conversations that they're at higher risk of being trafficked. A lot of it has to do with their age. Again, the traffickers are seeking out vulnerabilities. So there could be homelessness, abuse and neglect, mental health, feeling rejected or unloved. Again, that's attention seeking. The lack of awareness or drugs and alcohol all play into effect. There's different risk factors. Again, the trafficker is seeing where they can fill a need and prey on their vulnerabilities. And also on social media, there's a lot of gang activity involved. So again, there's those risk factors that they're looking for. And then they can friend them and try and build that trust and then exploit them. Next slide. We can skip that one. Thank you. And then I'll share one case study. If you can go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Back to the labor trap. So this is the United States versus Gonzalez. It was a group of leaders that managed group homes all across the United States and had claimed to help restore victims that were struggling with drug dependency and chemical dependency. And when they got there, they bolted the windows, they bolted the doors and shut the windows and wouldn't let them out. And then they were forced to panhandle 54 hours a week and took away their benefit, their what is that? Link benefits. So that's just one case of labor trafficking. And the next one. Human trafficking is the third world largest for illicit industries. As you can see on there. And so Family Resources Breaking Traffic has served 698 survivors in the past 5 years. In 2020 was the highest of 237 that we've seen. This year alone, I would guess would be, we've seen an increase. So I'm guessing that that's going to be higher this year. We've seen at least 30 referrals in the past 30 days. So one a day at least. So recognizing the signs, here are some of the signs. Just because some survivors, maybe you've seen some of these signs doesn't mean that they are being trafficked. But it's really important that if you are seeing signs and it's safe to do so, to ask the survivor, you know, if they're okay. And if you are like, if you have a chance to talk to them and get as much information as you can, and then calling the National Human Trafficking Hotline or texting, which will show a phone number at the end. Next slide. So if you think you see human trafficking, here's some things that you can go by. A lot of times we don't rescue the survivor. They've been surviving on their own already. We want to empower and equip them with the tools and the resources. And we are there to support them as they process through and navigate through their situation. So how should you respond? These are some things that you can do to respond in a trauma-informed way. Start by believing, prioritize their safety, mirror their language. Don't act shocked, sad, or judgmental. Don't blame them. Tell them what they need or what to do. Share their information. Don't share their information without consent. The biggest thing in my field is to listen to them and be there to support them and for them to know that it's a safe space and everything that they talk about is confidential. So that's the biggest takeaway that I can tell you is if you see a survivor, ask them if they're okay, ask them if they need help or what you can do to support them. And then if you see anything suspicious or you need reach out to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. And a lot of times I have better luck with texting them than calling them, but it just varied. And I think too that you can go on their website. So there's the phone numbers up there. That's it.
Questions? Okay, the vulnerabilities that she had quite a list up here. So,
I'm just wondering, I'm good. yeah, work. I was trying. I didn't know you could pay. Anyway, getting back to this all. You didn't mention calling local authorities, rather we should call the national hotline and let them identify the area or where we are located, and then they will contact the authorities, or what does that process look like?
Yeah, so you can actually call the authorities as well. I've done both. It's whatever is convenient for you.
Okay.
Do you see more like labor trafficking or sex trafficking as far as referrals?
Yeah, as far as referrals, we see a lot more sex trafficking. But yeah, it would be sex trafficking.
There's a signal if somebody is being taken.
I'm going to show you that at the end of tonight.
All right.
That's the international hand signal for help me. And it goes for anything, for violence, for trafficking. It's, and if you know it, in fact, there was a child that was taken, they were driving on 95 down through the Carolinas. Child was in the back seat, and as they passed cars, she was repeatedly making this signal. And the cars that they passed or were passing her, they noticed it, they called the authorities, and they were able to recover the child. But I've seen this used for women that were being violently abused. They were allowed to answer the door, but the gentleman was behind them holding a weapon, and yet the woman was able to at least signal. It can be left hand, right hand, doesn't matter. But that's the international hand signal, yes. Just to answer your question too, and I'm sorry, I'll move on real quickly. Statistic wise, on sex and labor trafficking, we used to say that there were 40 million victims worldwide. The UN just changed those stats 2 weeks ago. There are now 50 million victims worldwide. And it used to be, in fact, worldwide, in the world, it runs a ratio of about 70 to 75% labor trafficking and 25 to 30% sex trafficking. And that's in the world. But now you bring it down to the US, and in the US, those figures flip. In the US, unfortunately, we are a haven for sex trafficking in this country. And I think pornography and everything else attests to it. In our country right now, 70 to 75% of trafficking is sex trafficking. And it's 25 to 30% that is labor trafficking. And it's happening everywhere. In our state, in our country, there's over 500,000 traffic victims immediately right now. In our state, right now, there are thousands. And you look at your watch, what time is it? Whatever time you look at your watch, now, I don't care, 24 hours a day, any day of the week, any month. Whenever you look at that watch in Iowa, there are 320 trafficking victims in Iowa at that moment. That's how prevalent it is. And with that, I'm sorry, I don't need to keep beating the drum, but I have a little feeling for it. So Sarah, thank you so very much. Really appreciate it. Now, your next dose of medicine, if we can get this, is our presenter is Britta O. And yes, as you might have figured out, just like Sarah, her last name is not O, okay? It's an initial, and again, we cannot use last names for her personal protection and safety. Britta comes to us from Family Resources out of Davenport, and she is an advocate for survivor of domestic abuse for clients in Muscatine and Scott counties. Britta helps clients get access to resources, files for orders of protection, attends court hearings, provides emotional support, and helps provide stability for a survivor. Britta recently graduated from St. Ambrose University with a degree in forensic psychology. So please, warm welcome for Britta.
Hi, like you said, I'm Britta. I'm domestic abuse advocate. So as far as my presentation goes, I work with different clients than Sarah, but I'm kind of going off of her last topic. We do actually refer a lot of people to their department because, like she said, many people don't realize they are being trafficked, and a lot of people think that they are just in an abusive relationship. And then as we build a relationship and talk about more of what's gone on, they realized that it actually was trafficking, and they just had become so close with the trafficker that they didn't realize. But over the next thing. So we typically say domestic abuse and domestic violence kind of interchangeably, but we've been leaning towards domestic abuse more because there's so many, connotations that come with domestic violence. A lot of people think that it's just strictly physical abuse, and the way that the laws are written in the state of Iowa, it mostly focuses on physical abuse. But as we know, it can be so much more. It's just, it's emotional, it's psychological, financial, everything. So some of the other myths involving domestic abuse, it only happens to women of color and poor women. It happens to everybody. I mean, I have clients of all different socioeconomic statuses, different genders, different races, everything. There are other myths, like some people deserve to be hit. Many people that are abused think that they've done something to provoke it and that it's actually their fault. Of course, we know that no one deserves to be abused. Alcohol, drug abuse, stress, and mental illness cause domestic violence. That's definitely not true. I think those things can, those will provoke domestic violence just because, anger management issues and, alcohol and drug induced anger, that definitely plays a part in it, but that's not the reason behind domestic violence. It's an endless cycle. It's something that's taught. It's something that people learn. Domestic violence is a personal problem between a husband and wife. I think that we've definitely strayed from that, thankfully, that it's something behind closed doors that people don't need to talk about it. But I think now, like, we as a society have started to discuss it more and stop ignoring it as a problem and thinking that people can handle it on their own. And the last and probably the most damaging myth is that if it were that bad, that the person would just leave. And that's definitely not true. We'll get to that more later as far as barriers from, somebody being able to leave the relationship. So we define domestic violence as a pattern of abusive behavior in any relationship that's used by one partner to gain or maintain power and control over another intimate partner. So this can include physical, sexual, emotional, economic, or psychological actions or threats of actions that influence another person. This includes any behaviors that intimidate, manipulate, humiliate, isolate, frighten, terrorize, coerce, threaten, blame, hurt, injure, or wound someone. Abuse can be physical, sexual, it can be, there's a lot of different things that go into play. And it's really hard because state by state, the definition and the things that can get you an order of protection and the things, that relieve you from that domestic abuse, they change. But we know that abuse is abuse, state by state, it's the same thing. But sadly, we don't have laws that back that up. So some statistics, and as with Sarah's, these are just reported statistics. We know that this happens much more often than what's reported. Many people don't report, or they don't know what's happening until after the fact that it's abusive. So every 9 seconds, a woman is abused. And men who were, as children, witnessed their parents' abuse are twice as likely to abuse their own wives than sons without violent parents. 10 million children witness some form of domestic violence annually. And I would argue that that's even more, as far as, because the definition of domestic violence is bigger than what's reported. And at least 1 in 3 women experience domestic violence at some point in their lifetime, and domestic violence is the leading cause of injury for women. And that's also very true. When we go to hospitals, it's often not even disclosed to the doctor that what happened. The reason they're in the hospital for the injury is because of domestic violence. There will be an excuse made, or if the abuser is with them on site and they'll say that they fell down the stairs or they, hit their face on a cupboard door, and that's not the reason that they're in the hospital. So as far as it's already the leading cause of injury to women, it's even more than that. So. And so this is the power and control wheel. I'm not sure if any of you have ever seen this before. It's pretty popular in our field. But it was developed by, there was a shelter that had gone and talked to all of the people that were living there, and they wanted to see the different reasons that they were staying in their situation. And so there are, different segments, but I think, using intimidation, that's a big one, as far as just looks and gestures, and intimidation by destroying property, abusing pets, not necessarily hurting the person, but making it clear to the person that they could hurt you if they wanted to. Using emotional abuse, that would just be putting them down, making them have low self-esteem as if they deserve what's happening to them. Using isolation, that's a really big one. Kind of making it seem like it's you guys against the world, that like your family, your friends, they don't understand your relationship and they can't, no one's going to help you. It makes it seem like you're just by yourself, and obviously problems are a lot harder to solve when it's just you solving it. Minimizing, denying, and blaming. So that's, making light of what they've done to you, like, oh, why are you crying? That doesn't hurt, things like that, just making you feel like you're crazy for thinking that this is upsetting and this is harmful. Using children, that's huge. Threatening that you're going to make the kids get taken away by DHS, that you're going to lie to DHS about your behavior, that you don't deserve to be a parent. Kidnapping children, that's huge. Taking them from school or from daycare and not being willing to give them back unless you maintain your relationship with them. A lot of people, or a lot of abusers, use pregnancy as a way to keep women around. It gives you this link for at least 18 years to be with that person if they're pregnant. And it's just a big thing to keep somebody chained to you. Using male privilege. This is, not all heterosexual relationships have abuse, although that is a primary relationship. And, LGBT relationships do also, they can include abuse. It just happens. But using male privilege specifically in a male and male or a heterosexual relationship, that would be like putting the person in their place and saying that because you're a man, you're more in charge. Using economic abuse, that's the big one. Not allowing them to have a job keeps them from having resources, keeps them from being able to leave on their own. And then using coercion and threats, making and or carrying out threats to do something to hurt someone and threatening to leave them, especially if you have no resources of your own, you don't have family, if you're taking care of children, if they threaten to leave you, even if they're abusing you, you may be afraid for them to leave because they're what's, keeping you having food and a roof over your head. So as well as the power and control wheel, there's also the cycle of abuse. So this one is pretty clear and it happens very consistently, and depending on the relationship and the stage in the relationship, the cycle can be really rapid, like every single day it can happen all at once, or it can be weeks or months between different phases of the cycle. So stage one includes tension building. So the abuser starts to get angry and the abuse may begin. The victim feels like they need to keep the abuser calm. They're like walking on eggshells to keep things from escalating. And the next stage is the violent episode. So that's when there's the physical, sexual, or verbal abuse, and they get, very upset very easily. And this follows the tension building stage. And then after that is the honeymoon stage. So that's, wanting to make up, being overly apologetic, gifts, flowers, things like that. It also plays a big part if there are children involved, and children experience this cycle as well. So they may start to sense that their parents are starting to fight and they're not getting along, and maybe the child starts to try and act better in school, get better grades, and overperform in order to keep things even keel. Or oftentimes too, children start to act out in an attempt to try and distract parents from what they're fighting about with each other by them focusing on parenting the child. And then the violent episode, it will happen. The abuse will take place. The child may or may not witness it, or they hear it. And then they attempt to comfort the parent or comfort the other siblings and try and, then it parentifies the child to take care of the situation. And then the honeymoon phase, maybe the abuser buys the child a toy, or, talks to them about like, oh, it's never gonna happen again. I'm sorry, I just had one too many drinks, or things like that. And then the child, being a child, doesn't know what this means, and they think everything's gonna be okay. And they once again start trying to like prevent the abuse from happening in the first place. So effects of domestic abuse on adults. It definitely weighs on a person's self-esteem. They start to think that they deserve this, and that, everything that they've done has led up to what's happening. There's lots of health issues related. I mean, even just from injuries as well as just from stress induced. And lots of mental health issues like anxiety and PTSD and depression. Economic dependence. People become dependent on an abuser if they've been cut off from being able to support themselves and have their own life. Constant state of fear and uneasiness, feeling like abuse is deserved, feeling guilty for fulfilling their own needs, and social isolation and poor support system. It's hard because not often anybody outside of the relationship just can't understand why they won't leave, and they maybe don't take the time to understand all of the barriers in the way of them leaving. And so then they'll start to resent the person that's being abused as if they're perpetuating the cycle on their own, or they're not doing enough to protect themselves. And that's even harder on the person that's being abused because they know why they can't leave. They maybe can't effectively communicate that. And then here are their support people like leaving them behind. So like I had mentioned, there are many, many, many barriers to leaving. I always tell clients, no one understands your relationship like you and that person. There's never anything that I'm going to know that you don't already know. And it's hard to explain for them to explain that to other people. Barriers include fear of losing your children. If you can get an order of protection and you list your children as protected parties, that is helpful. You can recommend a visitation and that'll last the duration of your no contact order. It's not custody though, and so it can be scary to think about maybe going through a divorce and seeing if you may not have your kids as often as you used to have them. Fear of increased violence upon leaving. That is, the leaving period is the most dangerous point of time in the relationship, because as soon as the person that's being abused wants to leave, that's when they know they've lost all control and they will stop at nothing to keep them there. That is the number one time that people are killed. This is the number one time people are injured. Every single out call I've ever gone on, they were injured because they were leaving and they were trying to protect themselves. Love, I mean, anybody that's been in a relationship and you love that person, it's hard to imagine suddenly you're just gonna have to leave. You know, you've been together for how many years? I've had couples that are elderly that they've been together for 50 years and now all of a sudden they're thinking of leaving, and I can't. That's so heartbreaking, you know. It's hard to just watch all of that go up in smoke. Belief that things will get better, that kind of goes back into that cycle of abuse where you start to think the honeymoon phase really convinces you that things are going to turn around, and maybe that honeymoon phase lasts for a really long time and you think you've really finally moved past it, you know. Impact on children. Divorce is really hard on kids, moving is hard on kids, missing school, all of those things are going to be factors you're considering as far as leaving. Fear of failure. You don't want to disappoint other people by your relationship ending. You don't want to be seen as a bad, mom or dad or a bad partner. A lot of religious beliefs. If you are a part of a religion that really frowns upon divorce or separation, that may play a huge part in whether or not you can leave. Hopelessness. If you've been dependent on this person and then suddenly you have to leave, you may feel like there's no resources out there for you. Guilt and self-blame, like how that's been perpetuated throughout the relationship of why this is all your fault. Lack of financial resources, like I said earlier, not having a job, not being allowed to have a job. And it's hard to, I've met with clients that are wanting to prepare to leave and they want to get signed up because they know they won't have a job. They know they have kids to support for a short term. They want to be able to get some sort of government assistance to help them until they're able to have more of an income. But the wait list and how hard it is to sign up for, Medicaid and food stamps and everything, it can be really daunting for people. Inability to access services available, like I just said. Abuser appears to change and they start to realize maybe you're thinking, I want to leave, and they want to start acting like they're going to be a better person. Fear of retaliation, like I mentioned, it's the scariest time is when you're leaving. Needing time to plan and prepare to leave. This is especially hard if you have children. I mean, think about how many factors go into taking your kids on a vacation, and now it's even amplified more. needing or fear of the unknown and fear of change. Maybe you've been with this person for a really long time and you can't even imagine life without them. Fear of being alone and just exhaustion. Something else that's not listed on here is pets. Many people, if they leave their home, I mean, they're worried that their pet will suffer because of it. And that is extremely true. I mean, we have lots of statistics that talk about that with Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So we've been partnering with humane societies to talk about abuse and its relationship to animals. But many people are too afraid that their, pet will suffer if they go. And thankfully, we do have resources at our shelter. If you have a pet and you'd like to take it with you, we can help pay to board that animal until you're able to find your own home. But so safety planning, that's something that I go over a lot with clients, especially if their no contact orders are not approved by a judge. Many times you have to either plan to stay living with that person in that house or plan when you live separately or planning to leave. And there are a lot of different variables to that. We've had to work with clients who've been tracked on their routes every day. And so they will get documents out safely by driving past their friend's house on the way to drop their kids off at school and just doing one document in their mailbox every day for weeks at a time until they have all their social security cards, birth certificates, school records, everything. And it's because they're being tracked for their location, they can't break that route. We talk about, having safe people that you trust, whether it be neighbors or friends or family, safe places to go, having a neighbor and a backup plan as well in case something happens. Code words, I always kind of talk to my clients, like if you just text me gibberish and then you don't send any explanation as to why, then I'll know that you're in a really bad situation right now. Because sometimes you can't remember to text watermelon or whatever, so just a random slur of words without a further explanation. Keeping items ready to leave in a hurry if you need to. And that's another part, is you can't be too obvious that you have a go bag, because that can elicit a fight. So if you've already left the relationship, we always recommend changing your phone number. If you can't do that, you can also get Google Voice, and that'll screen your calls for you. When you answer, it'll say, blah, 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 I was trying to connect with you. And so sometimes that's helpful. Saving all of your documents and any, screenshots of abuse that have happened between the two of you. It's hard in the state of Iowa because that's not often recognized as abuse. But in any sort of evidence or pictures of injuries or any, damage to walls, things like that. Changing your locks if you can. Trying to avoid staying alone. Planning how to get away if you're confronted by an abusive partner. We always work with clients, like if you're leaving work, try and walk out with a coworker or a security guard, because if you're in the parking lot at night, obviously they know where you work and you want to be safe. And even just planning, where will you go or what will you do if you have trouble with your car on the way home? You don't want to be stuck on the side of the road and this person knows what your car looks like and they know your routes, Notifying school and work contacts. We always give extra copies of no contact orders to, your kids' school or daycare, your HR, anybody, like if you live in an apartment building and you have somebody at the front desk, you can give it to them just so that other people know to be on the lookout for that person. And you can also call a shelter resource like Family Resources, and they can provide support. So the effects of domestic abuse on children and adolescents. Kids, especially depending on the age, they don't know about abuse. They may not have any idea what a relationship looks like besides what your relationship is with your partner. And so if it's abusive, that's their idea of what a relationship is that it's abusive. As far as emotional, kids feel a lot of guilt, helplessness, fear, and confusion and anger. Behavioral problems, they withdraw or they blossom, it really depends on the kid. They can become an overachiever and underachiever. They start caretaking for their parent or for their siblings, especially in older kids, they tend to do that. Physical problems, like they may be going to the school nurse more often, having headaches, feeling nervous and having stomach aches. Social problems, feeling isolated, difficult friendships, and cognitive issues like feeling responsible for the violence, low self-esteem, having trouble trusting people. They may also just not want to leave school. School may be their safe place, and knowing that they have to go home for the night or the weekend or the break is terrifying for them. So safety planning is a little different when it comes with kids, so you may need to teach your child to be able to call 911. You've got to keep things simple because kids, especially if they're younger, don't often remember things. You know, having similar things like having code words, having safe places to run to, telling your kids that it's okay if something's going on, that they are allowed to leave you. It's so heartbreaking, but so many kids just don't want to leave their mom or their dad if a situation is happening. But the parent has to know that it could get worse if the kid is around, or it could affect the child and they need to have them leave. And, you know, it's just good to practice this with kids fairly routinely so that they remember if something arises. So as far as my role at Family Resources and my other advocates, we help with, I kind of call us sometimes professional problem solvers. I mean, you come to us in these crisis situations and we sort of see what are the big goals, what do we really need to focus on? Usually it's housing, maybe, you know, getting a job and income set up, focusing on the primary big needs, and safety is a huge one. So getting a no contact order filed is always hopefully number one. It's really, really hard because in the state of Iowa, you first need to define the domestic relationship, which can include, you know, sharing a minor child, being married within the last year, or dating within the last year, having lived together recently, or if it's a family member, but it can't be a biological parent and a minor child. So once you've met that qualifying relationship, then at that point it goes on to abuse. And then under Iowa law, it's that there has been physical or sexual abuse or a threat that was obvious enough that it could have been harmed. So if they pointed a weapon at you, or they punched and they missed you and hit the wall behind you, things like that. It's really hard because, you know, we've had situations where there was somebody that had the abusive partner was a sniper in the Marines, and they knew that they were going to be harmed, even though these messages were coming over text, but that doesn't qualify to get you a no contact order. And I know before I started this job, I always assumed I'd be protected if something were to ever happen. I always thought that a no contact order would be a viable option, but that's just not the case. It's hard going into this job knowing that there's only so much the police can do because of the way that our laws are written. There's only so much the courts can do. There's only so much the advocates can do, just because of the way that it is written in. And it's hard too, because right across the river, Illinois has amazing laws that cover so many things. They cover all sorts of things with emotional abuse. It covers stalking and harassment. That's not often the case in Iowa. So these are some of our numbers as far as who can be called in this situation. And this is also a map. There are advocates like me in every county in the state and across the country. And these are the different organizations that service each county. So I'm a part of Family Resources. So Jackson, Clinton, Scott, Muscatine, and Louisa are who we service. And we've worked, you know, if clients decide to relocate to a different area that we don't service, you can sign releases and you can communicate that they're going to be traveling to, you know, domestic violence intervention program in Iowa City. And so then you can help them get to a safe place, still have resources, and know that they're, you know, moving on. And then these are just other good resources like the domestic violence hotline and Love is Respect and ICADVA, which is one of the coalitions. And the next one is just discussion questions, but that's it.
You briefly touched on the difference between the two states, Illinois versus Iowa. What do you expound on that a little bit?
So yeah, basically, when you're filing for an order of protection in the state of Iowa, you have those two things that you need to meet. So you have your relationship and then the physical abuse that took place. In the state of Illinois, it's just the way that the filing is and the petition itself is just written differently. So you have that relationship as well as then it covers more things like verbal threats that's not covered in an Iowa order of protection, or, you know, threats over a text message or stalking. That's another thing in the state of Iowa. If there's a stranger stalking you, it doesn't qualify for an order of protection because they're strangers, so there's no like qualifying relationship. But in the state of Illinois, if a stranger were stalking you, that could qualify you for an order of protection. So it's just it's a lot stricter in the state of Iowa, and there's just like a higher burden of proof that you need to meet before you can get that order. And in Illinois, it's lower. So
Are there any like, broad group efforts to get those kinds of things changed in Iowa, to make a more inclusive set of expectations and wants?
yeah, I mean, that's definitely something we're always like working towards. There's honestly nothing more heartbreaking than telling a client that their order wasn't signed off on. It's kind of like the state saying, we're not going to protect you because it's not bad enough. Like, that's really how it comes off. And it's so heartbreaking. I mean, our goal is to make it more inclusive as far as what can qualify as abuse. I mean, it's hard to describe that we can, you know, stand up here and do a whole presentation on all of these things that we all know qualifies as domestic abuse, but then it doesn't back it up with the law. So definitely trying to mirror other states that have better standards as far as their no contact orders, and also just making sure that they're being enforced by all of the police officers. There was a woman, I don't know if you guys saw on KCCI, a woman that was killed because of a violation of a no contact order up in Jackson County not that long ago. And when you have an order against you, you're supposed to surrender all of your weapons. And so it's really important that the police enforce that when there is an order, so that that protects the protected party and their children. So yeah, definitely just mirroring other states, talking to other coalitions. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Great job, Greta. Thank you very much. All right, your fourth dose of prevention medicine this evening is coming from Judy Yates. Judy is the MCSA Domestic Violence Shelter Manager in Muscatine, and she's been with the Domestic Violence Shelter for 25 years. Judy completed the Frontline Leadership Program. She's certified domestic violence advocate and sexual assault advocate, and trained in conflict resolution. Her passion is to provide non-judgmental education, empowerment, safety, and compassion to those living in or fleeing from a life of violence. Judy is a lifelong resident of Muscatine. She's married to her husband, Mick, and she has two fur babies, Rosie and Ruby. So she enjoys spending time with her family and traveling. Please welcome Judy.
I know it's getting kind of late, so mine's actually not very long. But first of all, I want to thank Rotary for having us. It's always great to be able to get the word out about what we do. I'm sure the other advocates feel the same way. It's not sometimes a very glamorous job, but the work that we do is very important. And also because of confidentiality, a lot of times we do not get to have open houses or share the great work that we're doing because of confidentiality. So I am Judy Yates. I'm with the MCSA Domestic Violence Shelter Manager, and I've been there a long time. Next slide. So the definition of domestic violence is a pattern of behavior used to establish power and control over another person through fear and intimidation. Domestic violence can happen to anyone, regardless of gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, income, or other factors. Next slide. MCSA Domestic Violence Shelter offers safety and support by trained advocates. All our services are free and it's confidential. The shelter is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we provide all daily basic needs, including clothing, food, hygiene products while our clients stay there. The shelter has a comprehensive security system and works closely with local law enforcement. It is our goal to encourage and empower the women and children that we shelter to have a new start and live a life free of violence by promoting healing and change. If you know anybody that might be experiencing domestic violence of any form in their home, please have them call our crisis line that's answered locally 24 hours a day. And if you don't remember anything else while you're here today, that would be to memorize our crisis line number. We either work with somebody, know somebody, have a neighbor or somebody that goes to our church, a friend that is either been in a domestic violence situation or you suspect that there is. So if you can remember 563-263-8080. I also brought some pens that has the crisis line number on it. Feel free to take them. Our clients, not only do we provide a fully staffed, safe and secure location for our victims fleeing domestic violence, we get to know each client and what their unique challenges are. Every client, when they come into our shelter, is in a different place. Some people already have a car and a job. Other people have not been allowed to work. Some already have food stamps and maybe have all their important documents. Other ones do not. So everybody that comes in, we get to know their situation. They may be an immigrant and not be documented. So we start with everybody with their own personal needs and we establish their goals based on that. We develop a housing stability and self-sufficient case plan with them. They are required to meet with a counselor weekly and update those goals. We set the goals, build relationships, and provide options, support, and encouragement. We offer a Hear My Voice women's group 2 times a month with a retired therapist. She comes in and volunteers her time and discusses topics such as healthy relationships, guilt, loss, self-esteem, and empowerment. We have implemented a family enrichment program on the weekends where my staff are encouraged with the clients to play games, do crafts, baking, cooking, have a movie night. This helps with parenting skills and bonding. A lot of times in domestic violence relationships, maybe they were not allowed to discipline the children, so the children kind of walk all over their mom, or in other cases, they were made to be the disciplinary, so they don't have a really good relationship. So we try to encourage that and do activities with them on the weekends while they're there. We continue to look for ways to break down some of the barriers that our clients face, including transportation and safety, by allowing any of their workers, such as DHS, lawyers, Family First workers, meet with them, as well as public health come in 2 times a month to address any medical or health concerns. Because the location's confidential, we used to not allow anybody to, drop them off there. But we also know that it's really hard when it's pouring down rain, you've got 4 kids and you have to walk 4 blocks to meet your DHS worker, because if you don't, something's going to happen to you and your case is going to get messed up. So we have really tried to lighten a lot of those burdens. One thing that was talked about was pets. We partnered with, her name's Beth in Muscatine. She asked for pet's sake. So Beth's seen the need for people not leaving and if they couldn't bring their pets with them. So Beth has started a foster program that if somebody is staying at our homeless shelter or our domestic violence shelter, that they can bring their dog, cat. She has fosters for lizards, guinea pigs, horses. The only thing she has not found somebody to foster is snakes. You would not be, you would really be surprised at how many people will not leave. As Tom said, I have 2 fur babies. They mean the world to me. If I had to choose between leaving and leaving my pets there, if I was in an abusive relationship, I would be really concerned that the anger would be taken out on my pets. I would stay. They're part of my family. But knowing that you can leave with them and bring them to our shelter, and then we can arrange for the pet fostering. Beth will keep them until you get your own housing. She will also get them spayed, neutered, and she will get them up to date on their shots. So that's another great thing that we offer. We do education on dynamics of domestic violence, cycle of violence, the effects of domestic abuse on children and healthy relationships. We really work on empowerment and self-esteem to build and help them to start making decisions that they are not or were not able to make in the past due to their abuser having the control over them. Next slide. So the DV shelter receives referrals from the crisis line. Clients can call us directly, MCSA Homeless Shelter, family and friends or victims, family resources, doctors, emergency departments, therapists, DHS, probation officers, New Horizons, and other social service agencies. We are a small shelter. There's myself and 1 other full-time person, and then there's 4 part-time. Our crisis line rings in there 24 hours a day, and we only have 1 staff person on duty at a time. So, you know, that person is there to let the clients in and out, answer the crisis line, and to meet the client's needs. We are open 24 hours a day. It's a large four-bedroom house. We are in a residential area in Muscatine that if you did not know where our shelter was, you would just think we were any other house on the block. We plant flowers in the summertime to look like all the other neighbors. We put up Christmas lights in the wintertime, so we look like all the other neighbors. If you didn't know to look for our cameras that are around the house, then you would not even know that we were the domestic violence shelter. We work with school bus and the bus barn to have kids picked up and dropped off directly at our shelter. That's a really big thing. Kids are always afraid that they're going to, people on the bus are going to know that they're staying in a shelter. Well, because we look like any other shelter or a house on the block, they could just be, you know, an apartment building. They could be staying with family. But the bus barns worked really great with us to actually reroute. The kids do not even have to change their schools to the district that we're in. If they're in a completely different district across town, the bus will actually reroute buses to come and get them and to let them continue that year in their original school. And then they also will bring them back, and they don't make them walk to a bus stop. They actually bring them directly to shelter. And we have had bus drivers that have actually drove by shelter and called us and said that they thought they were being followed. So, you know, if we could make sure we were standing out in the front door, or that they'd be back around in a few times. And for a child that, you know, is going someplace that they don't know where they're at or any of the other people there, that can be a really comfort for them to be able to stay in their own school. Like I said, the crisis line is answered 24 hours a day. We assist with apartments and job searches and replacement of important documents. That's a big tactic that offenders use, and that's to destroy birth certificates, passports, social security cards, because they know if they either keep them or they destroy them, that if she does leave, she's not going to be able to sign up for any benefits. Those are required for almost anything. And social security cards are free to get, but you have to be able to use Quad Cities to get them, or you have to mail your ID. A lot of times they don't have their ID. Well, if you don't have an ID, you can't get a social security card. If you don't have a social security card, you can't get a birth certificate, and it's a vicious circle. And birth certificates cost money. So we will help with the fees for them to get those replaced. I think the one thing that's really important is throughout the state of Iowa, a lot of shelters have closed over the last several years. And, you know, we're very fortunate that our community raised money and kept our doors open. Because can you imagine that if your only choice is to stay or to go to a shelter, but the closest shelter is, you know, Davenport, if you're in Muscatine, or you know, Iowa City, or even further, there are still those shelters available, but they're in bigger towns and in bigger communities, and a lot of times they're full. So, and not that we aren't as well, but can you imagine giving up your church, your friends, your family, your job, your kids having to leave school and their sports for you to start over in another town where you know absolutely nobody? So we're very fortunate that in Muscatine and Muscatine County that we still have a domestic violence shelter, because a lot of places across the state have closed. Next slide. Most people think that domestic violence is a private family matter and choose not to get involved. However, domestic violence impacts the community in surprising ways. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and a perfect time to bring it out of the shadows. If you see something, if you think something, say something. It's not like it was back in the day. Oh, yeah, they're yelling, you know. If you suspect something with your neighbor, talk to them and say, hey, I kind of heard something last night. You know, if I hear that again, do you want me to call police? Or, you know, if you flick on and off your porch light, that'll let me know that, you know, you need help. You know, it's not their fault, and we need them to know that as a community and as family and as friends, and as the domestic violence program and as family resources, that we're there for them. Just a few numbers. This was as of last month. We had 315 crisis calls. Information referrals were 108. We at that time had sheltered 17 women and 14 children. That equaled a total of 2,035 shelter nights. We have not been empty in probably 7 years, where we didn't have a client. And then just to show you one of the statistics is the average woman leaves 7 to 10 times. So everybody says, wow. And that goes back to why don't they leave? Well, that's easier said than done. Sometimes we have clients that come and stay with us for one day and they know full right that they're going to go back. They just need that cooling off period. And we're here to support them in that decision and to do safety planning with them and not to tell them what to do or that they can't go back. We're there to support them and let them know that if they do choose to go back, hopefully they have a better safety plan. And if they do ever need us, that we're there for them again. We do realize that when people do leave numerous times, we see that their stay with us is a little bit longer and a little bit longer because they become a little bit more empowered, a little bit more educated. But just to let you know that the numbers that we have current, but during that time of 2022, people that called and seeked shelter and they were approved to come, but ended up not coming or changing their mind was 41 women and 39 children. So for whatever reason, from the time that they called us, maybe they made up, maybe they went to their sister's house, maybe they changed their mind. So the need is there and the need is there for the community in the area. The effects of domestic violence don't stop at the front door. Too often it spills into the community, into places that are supposed to be a safe haven. If a person is in an abusive relationship, we encourage them to strategically make others aware of the situation, particularly the children's schools and in their places of employment. The aggressor may show up and harass the children and their teachers or the victim and their colleagues. This can put people who have no direct link to the family in a potentially harmful situation. Making others aware of the situation can allow them to be proactive and have safety measures in place. MCSA Domestic Violence Shelter does not receive any federal or funding. We do receive United Way funds. So local support is greatly appreciated and has kept our doors open throughout the years. Some information if you would like to volunteer. I have my business cards and I also have our crisis line cards on the backboard as well as our brochures that has the power control wheel that they showed you listed out. So feel free to take those if you would like. We do take donations because we don't charge for our services, so we don't have any income that comes in. So we do take clothes, shoes, coats, hats, scarves, food, furniture, cooking utensils, and over-the-counter medication, etc. When a client does get to a point where they feel safe enough to move out, we have a church in town that has moving out tubs, and it has like a pot and a pan and silverware and dishes and plates and a roll of paper towels and 4-pack of toilet paper and a gift card for $20 to Walmart. And it's something that church has been doing. So, and they also give us air mattresses. So if nothing else, when they do get their own place, at least they have something to cook with. It's a pillow and blankets, and then we give them an air mattress. So they at least have something to start over with. But most typically when clients come to us, they come with the clothes on their back, or they come with a garbage bag or maybe a suitcase. And as stated, I mean, you can't plan for everything when you're trying to pack, especially quickly. One thing that seems like clients, when they come, they always forget bra, underwear, pajamas, and socks. I don't know why. It's either for them or the kids. They grab everything else, but they forget bra, underwear, socks, and pajamas. So we do take over-the-counter medication, things like that, because we provide everything for them, everything from the laundry soap to the dish soap, food for them to eat. And if you or anybody you know would like to create a fundraiser, or if you have any ideas for fundraising, you can contact Nick Horn at MCSA. We just did a trivia night a couple months ago at Geneva Country Club, and then we haven't been able to have our annual fundraiser for 3 years due to COVID, and that makes up over half of our budget. So this year we're actually going back to having it at Geneva Country Club, and it's set for April 15th. So it'll be the first time we've had our fundraiser in 3 years. So we're looking forward to having that and having a nice evening and raising some funds. So that's me and my time.
Good.
Anybody have any questions?
Terrific. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Amazing what you do. I am just continually impressed with these three ladies and Deacon Chris earlier. It's amazing when I hear what they do and what they go through each day. It's just amazing. God bless you for what you do, and thank you so much for being here. Put that hand signal up that,
Yeah.
right there, and, just so he'll pop it up here. Any questions at all? Anybody, anything? Tom?
I think, we just want to echo what you said to these ladies. Thank you so much for your work. It's kind of invisible work to most of us that we don't even know is happening, but it helps to have a night like tonight so that more and more people are aware of that, and hopefully we'll get you more support also than just in any way possible. So
Thank you.
thanks for being here.
Chief Whirling, anything you'd want to throw on the wall?
I think everything that the police went over tonight was great.
Thank you.
One thought that I had that was especially poignant was that we're sometimes limited with what we can do in law enforcement to help. And that's something that I can't make somebody do something. I can't make them report. When it does get to a certain point, there are laws in Iowa that we have to mandatorily arrest. And like, I think Rick was talking about whether it's a specific kind of relationship and there's physical injury, and I have to have a primary physical aggressor identified. If I can get those three things, then I can arrest someone. And that's the hard part about Iowa, is it is very strict. So it's frustrating on our side, but I can't change the both sides. But the more we can get out there, the more we can help people identify what trafficking looks like, what domestic violence looks like, we can provide them with resources. A lot of times when we're giving resources that these ladies help with, I'll ask them to put in their phone under somebody's name, like call it Jessica. And put the number in, so then you got the number, because if they find business cards and that kind of stuff, that can sometimes cause problems at home. So if you find somebody, encourage them to do something, it's a little sneaky, but.
Chief, thank you very much. And your being here says a lot about what you think and where you're coming from. And I know you have endorsed trafficking also. So thank you for everything that you do for West Liberty. To answer the question of earlier, this is a hand signal. Right hand, left hand, doesn't matter. Repeat it. And when done repeatedly, that is signaling. If you see that, call someone of an authority. Don't you do anything. Protect yourself, but please take action and make a call. Mary?
Thank you to you and to the Rotary for doing this.
And Mr. Mark for making everything work. Thank you for being here. Thank you.
It was so nice to meet you all.